On a freezing night in April of 1912, in the middle of the North Atlantic, the richest man aboard the most famous ship in the world stood on a tilting deck and helped his young, expecting wife into a lifeboat. He was worth a fortune so vast it is difficult to even picture. He could have bought the ship itself many times over, and none of it could save him now. He stepped back, by the accounts that survive, calm and composed, and let the small boat lower away without him. A few hours later, he was gone, taken by the same cold sea that took so many that night. He belonged to a family that had, for generations, effectively ruled the city of New York, and his loss on that ship marked a turning point in the story of the most powerful dynasty in America. This is the story of the family that owned New York and the king they lost to the Titanic, because power and money are never far apart. The name was Astor, and to understand the man on that deck, you have to go back to a poor immigrant boy with nothing but nerve. The founder of the family arrived in America in the 1780s, a young man from a modest German village with almost no money and no connections. His name was John Jacob Astor, and he possessed an almost frightening instinct for business. He began in the fur trade, buying furs from trappers in the American wilderness and selling them for enormous profit in the cities and overseas. He was relentless, shrewd, and willing to go where others would not. Within a few decades, he had built the largest fur business in the country and had become one of the wealthiest men in the young United States. But furs were only the beginning, because Astor then made a decision that would echo for 100 years and build a dynasty. He took the fortune he had made from furs and he poured it into something far more permanent: land. Specifically, the land of Manhattan, the island that would become New York City. In those early days, much of it was still farmland and open ground, and Astor bought it up quietly, patiently, in enormous quantities, correctly guessing that the city would grow to fill every inch. And grow it did. As New York exploded into the greatest city in America, the Astors owned the ground beneath it. They did not need to work. They simply collected rent from a city that expanded relentlessly around their holdings, year after year, decade after decade. They became known, quite literally, as the landlords of New York. It was one of the most brilliant long-term bets in the history of American wealth. By the second half of the 1800s, the Astors were no longer merely rich. They were royalty, in a country that officially had none. The family had transformed inherited money into supreme social power. One Astor woman in particular came to rule New York high society with an iron hand, deciding almost single-handedly who belonged among the elite and who did not. It was said that the finest ballroom in her home could comfortably hold only a certain number of the truly important people, and from that idea came a famous list of the families who mattered, the very top of American society. To be on it was to have arrived. To be left off it was to be nobody. The Astors did not just have money. They decided what money meant. Into this world of supreme privilege was born the man who would one day stand on that sinking deck. He was John Jacob Astor IV, named for the founder, and he was every inch the aristocrat, but also something more. He was a businessman in his own right who built one of the most famous luxury hotels in New York, a palace of marble and gold that helped give the world the very idea of the Grand Hotel. He was also an inventor and a writer, a man of real curiosity and ambition. He had everything the family name could bestow: wealth, fame, and a place at the very summit of society. And in the spring of 1912, returning from a long trip abroad with his young wife, he booked passage home on the maiden voyage of a magnificent new ocean liner, a ship the world was calling practically unsinkable. We know how that story ends. On its very first crossing, the great ship struck ice in the dark and began to go down. And in those final hours, the richest man aboard behaved by the accounts that reached the world, with a quiet dignity that people never forgot. He saw his wife safely into a lifeboat. He asked reportedly whether he might join her, given her condition, and was refused, because the rule that night was women and children first. And so he stepped back. He did not push. He did not use his fortune or his name to demand a place. He simply accepted it and stayed aboard, and was lost with 1,500 others in the freezing water. His young wife survived and carried their child, and carried the story of his final calm out into a world that would tell it for a century. His loss was more than a personal tragedy. It felt to many like the end of an era. The man who died was the living symbol of the greatest of the old American dynasties, and he had gone down with the very ship that had itself become a symbol of the doomed arrogance of the Gilded Age, the belief that money and engineering had conquered every danger. The unsinkable ship had sunk. The untouchable family had lost its king. And though the Astor fortune did not vanish overnight, the family's role at the absolute pinnacle of American life began slowly to fade in the decades that followed, as new fortunes rose and the old order gave way. Now, in fairness, we should not paint the Astors purely as tragic aristocrats, because honesty demands the harder truths too. The original fortune, for all its brilliance, was built on the fur trade, a business that involved real exploitation, and the founder was also involved, for a time, in the trade of opium, a dark and profitable commerce that sat quietly beneath the respectable surface of the family name. Great fortunes are rarely as clean as the ballrooms they pay for. The Astors gave America grand hotels and libraries and a glittering high society, but the ground it all stood on, like so many fortunes we have explored, had shadows in its foundations. And that is the uncomfortable truth beneath the marble and the legend. We imagine that enough wealth and power might place a family beyond the reach of fate itself, that to rule a city, to sit at the very top of society, is to be somehow safe. But on a cold night in the middle of the ocean, the richest man in the world stood on a sloping deck with all his millions, and the sea did not care. His money bought him a place on the finest ship ever built, and could not buy him a place in a lifeboat. The same lesson waits quietly for every dynasty that believes its fortune has made it untouchable. The Astors ruled New York for 100 years, and they, too, learned that no fortune is a shield against the world, because power and money are never far apart. Discovery continues.